Hello. Welcome. I'm gonna do a evening drive. Not very long, actually. I get set up for it. And while I'm driving, I'll engage FSD beta, full self-driving beta on Tesla. And we'll see how the drive goes. And while we're driving, since it's doing the work for me, I'll be focused in on just having a conversation. All right, I think we're ready here. We'll get it in drive and set it off. 1, 2, and we're off. All right. On this drive, we're gonna have some city streets, and then jumping on the highway briefly, and then back to city streets. So it should be a good mixture. We have a car coming. All right, good. It sees it nicely. So in this evening, we've got my focus has really recently been on. It's just an interesting dynamic. The economy, um, the international community, financial system, the U.S. Fed, and the other central banks' sovereign debt, all the happenings that are going on with this situation. It's interesting just because, I mean, these are educated, experienced individuals running these institutions, these financial institutions, these banks, and they understand the dynamics. And there's news reports and evidence identifying that these risks were found well in advance. Warnings were given. The central bank doesn't go into these situations without knowing what's going on. They have these reports. They know what's on the balance sheets of these banks. They're regulated, understanding that many of these banks went heavy into these mortgage-backed securities, MDS, of the 10-year or longer, mostly 10-year durations at what was, at the time, rather low rates, 1 to 2%. And, because of that, and the backdrop of what's happening with the recent Fed rates being increased in a high velocity, going up and up and up over the past 12 months, to reach levels not seen since 2008, and that says a lot given where we were. So, it's just hard to believe that anyone was surprised that these events were occurring. I guess maybe they were anticipating it. They were ready because once it happened, it seemed like they were able to move rather quickly, right? It's almost as if um, it was programmed in. It was planned. We're going to raise rates. We try to knock down interest, the inflation rate as much as possible, getting it back to this historical 2%. I would say almost arbitrary 2%. The only real reason to have a rate, inflation rate target and set it to a number, say 2%, is just so that there's something to shoot for and something to plan around and something to, construct a system with. But 2%, 3%, 4%, what does it really matter? At the end of the day, it's just a matter of like wages keeping up with affordability and money flow and money supply versus the demand and all that good stuff. So I guess getting back to the point, this is a little bit of going all over the place, but essentially they had to have known what's going on. They had to know eventually something will happen or break. They didn't know when, so they were happy to just ride it along as much as they could. I guess the calculus here, the assessment was, we need to raise rates. Let's see how far we can raise it, how quickly we can raise it until something does eventually break. When it does break, we know what steps we're going to take. We're going to backstop it. We're going to reassure everybody, and we'll at that point know how far we could take it. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Because you can model everything, but it's hard to model the timing. You can't know when psychology is going to be a factor in leading to the situation, because it is a big part of it, right? You have to have the people start to lose faith in the system, where they're removing their money from the system in order to create these bank runs, and then in order to then cascade into the next domino. So that had to be the plan. I mean, that's where it just logically makes sense. They pushed it to a breaking point, and once they broke, they went to their plan. They went to their book. Their plan is like, do this, this, and this. Reassure the consumer, reassure the depositor, bring in liquidity, open up the Fed window, do what it needs to be done to stabilize the system. And then at that point, this is as far as you can take it with the interest rate hikes. Then you know for sure. It's like maximizing both ends. Now, knowing that, you know that the Fed meeting, if that's true, then what we should expect in the Fed meeting is no more rate hikes. That would be the most that would make sense in this scenario that's I'm playing out. So no more rate hikes. What does that mean? A pause, not a pivot, a pause, because they're not cutting yet. They're going to say they're going to go to the meeting, say, hey, I think we've taken away where we wanted to. All the data shows PPI, wage, blah blah blah. They'll cherry pick the data they need in order to say, okay, you know what? It all makes sense. We did our job. It's perfect. We landed it exactly where we wanted to. We did stress the system a little bit, but that stress was managed. And now we're going to pause. We're going to see our effects play through. But there will be no rate hikes. I mean, there will be no rate cuts. They'll kind of play that. They'll play that line, pausing, but we're not going to be cutting. That's just rhetoric to kind of keep the line so things don't get out of control, and that's perfect. I mean, that's going to be a perfect situation for risk assets to go back to increasing, and they need that because what they've done essentially is given all this money through matching, basically taking those mortgage-backed securities and they've taken the mortgage-backed securities and basically paid par to these banks as a loan, and those loans have to be paid off within a year. So at this point, not only are they going to pause, but within maybe not May, but maybe June, July, August, definitely before the fall, you're going to see a rate cut, and they're going to have to start cutting and cutting and cutting, and this will happen almost automatically because the bond market is going to already see this coming, and so it's going to already start to price that in. Rates will start to come back down. So now the money borrowed that we're able to stabilize the system and get the banks to de-risk on these mortgage-backed securities and to pay off the loans from the federal government is now going to be able to be paid off at a lower rate. And in the meantime, they can reinvest all that money into something else that's risky. So, and here we are. The ride is done, no interventions, and was able to kind of like flesh that out. And it was good for me. Like, these conversations are not something like I know everything or I know what I'm talking about. It's almost as if when you have to talk it out loud, it solidifies and helps you kind of see things. So for me, Fed meeting on Wednesday, no rate increase. Initially, I was thinking it was going to be 25 basis points, but at this point, based on everything that happened, the plan is pause, no rhetoric to say no cuts coming, and eventually we will see the rates come down and cuts start to happen by the end of the year. Perfect. So plan accordingly, invest like you should, and come out better for it. Have a good night.